You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. Apologies for last week's episode, or lack thereof. I was traveling, so I'll make it up to you guys and we'll have two episodes. This will be a bonus episode, and then later on in the week we'll have another episode. And in today's show, a double make-up to you guys. This will be strictly questions that I've received. And we'll start off with LeBron James. And by far and away, this has been my most requested topic of all time. And when I say of all time, all 6 months. That's how long the show's been going for. But we had so many people messaging me and emailing me, asking me to respond to a video which is, I guess you can say, it's viral. It's been viewed 180,000 times on YouTube, and it's done by RB the Breakthrough, and I've never heard of him before. It was an interesting topic. It was about LeBron, obviously, and performance-enhancing drugs, or PEDs, steroids. I don't like saying steroids because after watching that South Park episode with Jimmy, every time I hear steroids, I think, Jesus Christ, Dad, steroids? It's just, I don't know, just one of those mental things. But anyway, I'm going to try and stay focused here. And this is a very serious topic. And the reason for this is the implications are very far-reaching. The implications go far beyond LeBron James. It goes far beyond the NBA. This is really the integrity of basketball that we're talking about. But we'll get to that in a minute, because I think it's important that we do a little bit of context to this story. I don't want to just say, LeBron James, PED, let's erase his history altogether. No, I'm not going to do that. But there was a story that the media is essentially trying to squash. It was a biogenics laboratory in Miami that has been linked to LeBron James and Dwayne Wade as well. Let's be fair about this. And one of the employees there has come out and stated that, and alleges, allegedly, another South Park reference, but she alleges that LeBron James was using supplements there, as essentially taking PEDs. Now, I don't want to get into the whole allegation. I'm going to be linking the video that I've been requested to respond to specifically, and that goes into a much better detail with the context. But I don't want to spend 15 minutes listing the context. If you guys are unaware of it, I encourage you to check out the video to get some background knowledge to this story. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to skip that, and I'm just going to respond essentially to what this gentleman is saying in regards to LeBron and whether he is on PEDs and whether this is a smoking gun or not. And I've got to be honest with you, I don't think it is a smoking gun. Now, I'm torn on this. People think that, I hate the guy, or I wish, he was never born, and all this other stuff. Some of the stuff that gets leveled at me because I don't think he's a top 5 player of all time. Top 10, absolutely, not top 5. But it's borderline ridiculous. I've never seen a more insecure fan base than the LeBron James fan base. But what I will say here is, I feel conflicted here, because if I was on a jury and I was asked to say whether I believe he's guilty or not guilty, there's just not enough evidence. But we're not on a jury. So, as you can tell, I'm probably going to lean to, I kind of do believe that he has been using performance enhancers. And the reason for this is simple. We have never seen a player on any sport, any athletic-based sport, even the skill-based sports like tennis players, eventually their body will start to wear down. My goodness, look at Tiger Woods, how much his body started to wear down, and that's golf. Now, basketball is one of the most athletic sports in the world because of the quote-unquote no contact, especially now where you're not allowed to have any contact. You're meant to be able to move your feet and jump and elevate over people so you can make your shots or get to the basket and finish or block shots or get rebounds or whatever it is. There are very few aspects of basketball that do not or will not give you an advantage if you're a world-class athlete, or at least if you're a better athlete. If player A is a better athlete than player B, and they're both just as fundamentally sound, player A is going to have a big advantage over player B. It is just that simple. Now, do I think he's on steroids? Yeah, when I say yeah, I mean that's really struggling to get it out. But yes, I do. I do think he is on them because when he came back to Cleveland, and this video refers to this. When he came back to Cleveland, he looked like such a different player. He did not look like the machine. People were even having rumors that he was a robot or not in the 2014 finals. And then all of a sudden he came back to Cleveland and he wasn't the same player. And then he took that weird hiatus in the middle of the season that no one could explain. It was very hush-hush. He did go back to Miami and he came back a totally different player and came back like the LeBron of old. Now, we have seen players get bigger and stronger, and let's be honest here. With steroids aren't always muscle growth. A lot of times they are explosive, right? So you don't have to turn in. The example I'm going to give here is Barry Bonds. And there's a great quote from Bob Costas. I think it was on a Keith Olbermann interview, but I'm not too sure. I'll try and dig it out and I'll provide that link as well. And he was asked as to whether he thinks Barry Bonds was using steroids. And Costas said that just because we don't have a confession and just because we don't have a positive drug test result, that doesn't mean anything from what he's basing his opinion on. He saw Barry Bonds play for the Pittsburgh Pirates, I think it is. I'm not a huge baseball fan. And he was scrawny, he was skinny, he was essentially a base runner. I'm sorry, I mean a base hitter. But he definitely wasn't, a home run slugger. Then he goes out to San Francisco and he gets jacked. He looks huge. Think Eddie Guerrero WCW compared to Eddie Guerrero WWE. That's how big he gets. Now I get what Costas is saying by not everything is CSI. We don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. What the eye test is telling us is how does somebody at that age suddenly get that big and that much more explosive without the help of PEDs? Now LeBron is a little bit different because LeBron was always big. When he was 18, when he came and played his first game against the Sacramento Kings, and he was always big. He was always strong for his age. But he was never jacked. He wasn't Karl Malone jacked. And now all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but since Miami, really, he looked huge. I mean, absolutely monstrous. And he didn't lose any of that explosiveness. So the example of Barry Bonds to LeBron is quite extreme. I don't necessarily buy into it. I don't think it's as clear cut. But there are certain things, as I said before, for example, when he just took a hiatus midway through the regular season, the 2014-2015 regular season, to go back to Miami, even though he's playing in Cleveland, and he takes 2 weeks off, and he comes back, and suddenly he's pretty much the same type of player. His explosiveness miraculously returns. It raises some eyebrows. So, if you watch that video, there's a couple of things as well. He's talking about LeBron's hairline, which is true. Steroids will have a negative impact on your hair. And also the facial muscles. They will get enlarged. Now, the reason I know this, I've never taken steroids, but I played rugby and there was quite a few people there that had taken steroids, and you pick up certain things by talking to them and they explain to you, or they don't explain to you, but you just overhear them talking about this stuff. So yeah, it is hearsay, but that video also does include snippets from bodybuilders saying the exact same thing. And when they talk about LeBron's beard and stuff like that, and like the facial growth, not the facial hair growth to potentially cover up some of those muscle growths or benign tumors, really, in his face. It's all circumstantial, and as I said, if I was in a jury, I would not convict him. I would not say, yeah, he's guilty. But if I'm being asked as to whether I think he's on steroids, the balance of probabilities leans me towards yes. I do believe that he is on steroids. We have never seen a player. He's 33 now. He just turned 33 in December, and his head's still at the rim. So I mean, we've seen players transform. We've seen Jordan get a lot stronger. We've seen Dennis Rodman get a lot stronger. Karl Malone get a lot bigger. But when they were around that age, you never saw them get bigger whilst maintaining the athleticism of a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old. We've never seen that before. And it's kind of disappointing because I remember when I was first really started to get into basketball, I was talking to one of my best friends, Matt Unicum, and I always thought that American football players were the best athletes in the world. And ironically, I was watching a skills competition, one of the All-Star weekends. I think it was the 2007 one. I might be wrong with that though. But Dwayne Wade and LeBron James were in it. And when I saw how easily they would getting up to, because back then the skills competition, you finished up with a layup. Or maybe you started with layup. I can't really remember, but I remember watching the ease of Wade and LeBron going up and just finishing it. And I said to him, I said, look, watching that, I've got to change my mind here. I think basketball players are the most athletic athletes in the world. And he, of course, agreed with me. But it's kind of concerning thinking back to that, because these are the two names linked to that scandal. And I want to be wrong here. Let me state that as well. I really, really hope that my gut feeling with this, or my opinion on this, is way off and he's never touched them. And there's selfish reasons for that. Because if it comes out that he was using steroids, PEDs, whatever you want to call them, this entire decade gets nullified. All the accomplishments, the 2016... What do we do with the 2016 championship then? Do we hand it to the Warriors? If LeBron was, he was a finals MVP and it comes out that he was on steroids, what do we do with the 2012 one? Does Kevin Durant have 2 rings? Can he go back to Oklahoma now because he already had a ring, so he never had to go to Golden State? What happens with the 2013 championship? Does Tim Duncan now have 6 rings? We could come up with all kinds of crazy scenarios as to, do titles get vacated? It's such a mess. And quite honestly, I blame David Stern for this. Because he was called into Congress just following the Jose Canseco situation with baseball. All major sports were called into Congress. And the only reason baseball got cleaned up, because everybody knew that baseball was roided up. But the only reason it got cleaned up was because Congress got involved. And it's so disappointing that these leagues cannot police themselves when it comes to steroids. And I understand that it's a difficult thing to solve. You'll never solve it. But what David Stern said to Congress when he was questioned about drug testing for steroids was, we've never had a problem, so therefore we don't test. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. Why would you even say that? And then if it comes out that LeBron's on it and Wade's on it, not just LeBron, Wade's a top 20, top 30 player of all time as well. How do we? Who else could be potentially on this? What about all the Phoenix? Remember how people were making jokes about how it was a miracle whenever players would go play in Phoenix, whether it was Grant Hill or Shaq or Steve Nash, that they were miraculously, their careers would extend. And then when they go to other places like Cleveland for Shaq, or the Clippers for Grant Hill, or New York with Amari, their careers were essentially over again. At what point? And this is why I kind of tend to think that maybe there's some truth to this. At what point why does the NBA turn a blind eye to the possibility of this being a very serious situation? Because quite honestly, if they had nothing to hide about this, all they would have to do is test him. That's all they would have to do, is test him. And yet they won't. And the media's trying to hide it, which makes me think that there's even more to it than that. I hope I'm wrong with this. Because if he goes down, the last 10 years of the NBA goes down with him. His entire career goes down. He's not gonna, how many people think of Barry Bonds? And Barry Bonds wasn't even found guilty of anything. His trainer was, but they never had a positive test result for Barry Bonds. And they never had a confession from the trainer saying that he gave it to him. And Barry Bonds can't get into the Hall of Fame. Barry Bonds is always considered, which is another screwed up element to it. I mean, you have guys that admitted to taking steroids, such as Alex Rodriguez, and they became more beloved. Everyone hated A-Rod. Even Yankees fans hated A-Rod prior to him admitting that he took steroids. And then after he admitted taking steroids, they saw a human side to him, if you can believe it. This is how bad sports journalism and sports fans are at times. And they started cheering him, where he used to get booed. Oh, it blows my mind. Anyway, to answer the question, to respond to the question, he does deserve the benefit of the doubt. But do I believe that he's taken them? Yes, I do believe him. That he's taken it, because it's just too many things are lining up for me to, and yes, they are circumstantial. In the same way that I believe Barry Bonds took it as well. But seriously, the NBA has to do such a better job. You know, they say how the NBA is meant to be a progressive league. There are now two things potentially hanging over like a dark cloud over the legitimacy of this sport. One is the inconsistencies in officiating and the absolute BS that we get fed as justification for those inconsistencies. And now it's steroids. That's ridiculous. It really, really is. And everyone seems to think of this bright future for the NBA. All it took was steroids to really derail baseball. And we have seen betting scandals and things of that nature derail college basketball. But the NBA, I'm not sure if it could handle two of those things simultaneously. Or around the same time. Now let's move to a slightly more positive and energetic topic, and that's the Golden State Warriors. And before, actually, you know what? Obviously, the questions were about the book reading that I did as one of the episodes from my book, which was how the 2017 Warriors stacked up against all the great teams in NBA history. So we've got a few questions there. But this is a question that I didn't receive. It just came to me then. It's something that I've noticed over the last couple of weeks, and that's the injuries associated with the Warriors. And is anyone else buying this? Because I'm not. The amount of injuries that they've received, and of course they can't get up and say, "Oh yeah, we're resting all four of our all-stars." So here's my theory. I think these guys are injured. Maybe not Curry's ankle, because we kind of saw his reaction to that. But I mean, if they're going to that extent, but remember the league said they're going to crack down on players resting unnecessarily. And I think they realize that they probably could catch the Rockets, but it's not a guarantee. So they're not going to burn themselves chasing it out. They're locked into the number 2 seed. Plus, the way that Oklahoma's playing now, it looks like Oklahoma will settle into either the 4th or 5th seed, which means they'll play the number 1 seed and not the 2 seed should they advance. And I think it's in Golden State's best interest to avoid Oklahoma, because Oklahoma is custom built to take down the Warriors. And they're a much more difficult matchup for the Rockets as well. I think the Rockets would beat Oklahoma probably more convincingly than what Golden State would. In fact, if Golden State was to play Oklahoma, I would probably lean towards Oklahoma beating them just because of their ability to be able to take away essentially what Golden State likes to do whilst being able to hurt Golden State's weakness, which is on the glass. Now that leads me to a myriad of questions that I got from the reading and the book essentially. And the biggest thing that I got was that I was disrespecting the Warriors. So I'm not going to go through and read all the questions because there's too many of them. But the general consensus was I was undervaluing what the Warriors, how good of a team the Warriors were last year. Now, it's difficult because they weren't tested last year. So there's a couple of things here. They weren't tested against good teams. When they were tested, they were losing to San Antonio. So we don't even know if they would have beaten San Antonio. I think they would have. Probably it would have been a much longer series, but it wouldn't have been a sweep. And then Cleveland just capitulated, and LeBron went into supreme stats mode rather than win by any means necessary mode. And Golden State was able to control everything in big moments with the exception of Game 4. So all the fourth quarters, Golden State were in complete control of those situations. So I can't look at what they did against those teams with any type of certainty and say, oh yeah, well they beat a good San Antonio team with an MVP candidate and a really good coach. Or they beat a top 10 player of all time loaded with 2 other all-stars and a bunch of great role players such as Channing Frye and J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver and all those other guys, right? That really doesn't mean a whole lot to me. So the record of 16-1 doesn't mean anything to me, right? When I look at Golden State and I think to myself, okay, they're a great shooting team, decent passing team as well, good at using screens, whatever, right? Those screens are only worth something if the guy that has to switch on those screens, usually a big, doesn't have the capability to get out on the perimeter and guard, Steph Curry or Klay Thompson or Durant or whoever, right? Now, when you're comparing the Golden State team as to who they would win up against the 96 Bulls or the 91 Bulls or the Lakers, whichever Lakers team you want really, or some of the Celtics teams, you've got to ask yourself, can they respond to that? Does first of all, let's use the Bulls for an example. The Bulls had Jordan, Pippen, Harper, as well as Dennis Rodman, right? All 4 of those are excellent defenders. 3 of those defenders are, in my opinion, top 2 at least all time at their position on that side of the ball. So the screening doesn't necessarily help you there because you just switch. They just switch. And then the question you have to ask from a Golden State standpoint is, okay, if Chicago switches, how does Golden State respond to that? Do they have a counter to that? Can they do something beyond setting high screens and ball movement, secondary ball movement off cutting? And I don't think they do have anything offensively, quite honestly. If they run into a team like the 96 Bulls, they are screwed. They have no counter to that. The other thing against the 96 Bulls is how do they stop them? How do they stop the Bulls from doing what they want to do offensively? Now, you would get a much better argument from me if you're talking about the 2018 Warriors because of the emergence of Durant defensively. So now you have Durant emerging defensively. Klay Thompson is a decent defender, above average, of course, at his position. You got Draymond Green as well. So all of a sudden now you have a little bit of depth there. Players can contribute on that side of the ball now for Golden State. But the last year's team, absolutely not. And the point that I'll always bring up is Klay Thompson was guarding Kyrie Irving, and Kyrie Irving's a very talented offensive player. But in 2 NBA finals, Kyrie Irving averaged around 30 points per game with Thompson guarding him. Now, a couple of things. Jordan ripped through teams like the Knicks and the Sonics with Gary Payton, and the Miami Heat, who were a very tough defensive team, as were the Orlando Magic with Nick Anderson, Penny Hardaway, Brian Shaw, those guys. Now, those were very physical defending teams as well. Now, if you put a Klay Thompson on him, or Draymond Green, or Kevin Durant, whoever they're going to throw at him, these guys cannot be physical with him because of the new rules. Now, if we go back to the other rules, then all of Golden State's offense gets thrown out the window because I'm not convinced that they'll be able to survive in those older rules. So if we're playing under today's rules, then the Bulls' offensive talents get amplified that much more than what they actually did back then, because it's an easier game to score in today's game. The other point is, even with Kyrie Irving lighting up Thompson, what do you think Jordan's going to do if Kyrie Irving was able to do that? Jordan was even more complete. He could take you into the post as well as face up on you and get to the front of the rim, get to the foul line. Excellent passer of the basketball. He had all those, and of course he was clutch. Now, even if he misses, now this is the kicker on all this. Even if Jordan is having bad shooting games, the Bulls were such an incredible rebounding team, which is exactly the Warriors' weakness. Even a bigger weakness in their perimeter defense is their inability to control the backboards. And you throw Dennis Rodman into the equation, who was one of probably the greatest offensive rebounder since Wilt Chamberlain. And that's just a recipe for disaster. So you can't just look at the stats of the numbers and say, oh, well, they went 16-1 in the playoffs. Yeah, okay, whatever. That means nothing to me. Look at the competition they went up against. And then if you want to turn around and say, well, there was a super team waiting for them in Cleveland, I'm not sure if that was a super team or not. They were loaded with talent, but they had no idea how to play together, and they had no idea how to play to their strengths. The Bulls always played to their strengths. Very, very tough mentally team. Plus, I didn't even talk about the coaching aspects of it. So, I get the question, but just the book was designed for people to read it beyond the numbers. Don't just look at oh, well, this record was such and such, therefore they're better. If that was the case, I would have picked the 92 Bulls over the 91 Bulls. For example, the 92 Bulls had 67 wins, and quite honestly, it could have been around 73. They took their foot off the accelerator in many games. But the 91 Bulls only had 61 wins. So and the number 2 ranked team, which was the 2001 Lakers, they only won 56 games. The year before that, they won 67. So that means nothing. Like that, if you just look at the winning percentages, you've got to look at the competition, who they went through, and you got to look at, quite honestly, how do you counter? If a team is able to at least slow them down, if not take away what they do best, which is perimeter scoring and jump shots, usually from isolations after a moving screen, which people don't like to call anymore, but that goes around as well. What goes around comes around. So if Golden State's able to get away with that, then guess what? That same thing's going to happen with whoever their opposition is. So the point I'm just trying to say is look at basketball a little bit deeper than just the box score. Don't just look at the stats. And don't just look at like NBA 2K and say, oh, well, I can do such and such an NBA 2K, therefore I should be able to, that's how it's going to be in real life. Of course not. Look at how Golden State responds when teams are able to take away their primary or their favorite way of scoring, and do they have a counter? They don't. And do they themselves, the Warriors, have counters to what these other great teams like to do. So what's their counter if they're going up against the 86 Celtics? When you have four Hall of Fame front court players. And yes, Bill Walton wasn't quite the MVP standard that he was with the Blazers, but he was still damn good. And you got Parrish, and you got McHale. You got those three guys crashing the glass. How is Golden State meant to force their tempo, their style of play, when they can't get a rebound? They would be so screwed. It's not funny. And they are yet to come up against a team that is going to force them to counter. Now, if they come up against this Rockets team, assuming that they don't implode, if they do come up against that Warriors team, the Rockets team, they will be forced to counter because they won't be able to play the pace that they want to play. Because the Rockets play their pace even better. They have even more options. They have even more weapons. So that will be very interesting. And we're out of time and I answered 2 questions. This is pathetic. I'll try to answer some more in the second show for this week. Thanks so much for listening, guys. And follow us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook, I should say. Follow us on Instagram. Putting up some content on YouTube, but it's essentially just the podcast episodes at this point. And thank you so much. All the episodes are available on iTunes, on Stitcher, on istilllovethisgame.com. If you have some more questions that you want to be answered on the show, it's Matt at istilllovethisgame.com. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next episode.